Hey, day 3, thank you for being here again. I would like to introduce Katy Whitaker, who is the development coordinator at Monty Tech. She's going to tell you a little bit about herself, and then please don't be shy.
Thanks so much for that introduction. It's a very in-depth introduction. So I am Katy Whitaker. I'm at Monty Tech right now. I've been there for 16 years. My title is terrible. I'm just going to get it out there. I know it's terrible. It's development coordinator. It's kind of one of those all-encompassing jobs. And the joke at Monty Tech is that everything requires development, just handy for Katy kind of thing. And I think because I've been there so many years, I'm able to help find the answer for a lot of things. So that's what happens when you stay someplace for 16 years. And I love the school and I love vocational education. I think my passion for vocational education started way back. I grew up in New Mexico, and in the high school there were no vocational programs. The only vocational opportunities for students were at the junior college level. So fast forward a few years, I ended up being an administrator at the college out there I taught, and I was director of student recruiting. And the best way to recruit people was to get to know the programs on campus. It was a very small campus. So I went around and really got to know these programs, and I was just floored by their cosmetology program and their barbering program and their automotive program. So I got to know those programs, and it made my conversations with potential students so much easier. And then I started really thinking about what that community needed. It was a very diverse population, one industry, really the oil field industry. Nobody really left to go to college. People grew up in the same town, often the same homes, and stayed forever. So there was a very high teen pregnancy rate, a lot of young unwed mothers in that town. So then I thought, I'm going to start recruiting these non-traditional women that have babies at home that they're taking care of, because I started to see how these vocational programs right down the street could really improve their station in life, for lack of a better phrase. So they would often say, Miss, it's too expensive, and you're gonna die when I tell you how much these classes were. $13 a credit hour. I'm not lying. When I tell you $13 a credit hour, one class was $39. And I'm not that old. It really wasn't that long ago, but the oil field industry offset the prices of all public education in New Mexico. So these prices were ridiculous. So I would say to the kids, young adults, yeah, you can. I promise you can afford it. Let's fill out this FAFSA form. They had no experience with any of this. They were several years out of high school, so they didn't have guidance counselors to rely on. So I found myself filling out FAFSA forms with these mostly young women. And they would come back and say, I got so much money, I could pay for the daycare, I could pay for the classes, I could pay for my books, and I still have a little money left over. And I'm like, then you have no excuse. Let's go enroll, right? So we started really building up these programs, and I just loved that experience. And that was something that I kind of carried with me. Fast forward, I become a young, not so young, mother myself. I moved up here. I went to Boston College. I got my master's degree in educational administration. I loved teaching. I'm a better administrator. The kids would probably thank me for being an administrator. I have very high standards and very strict. In a classroom, I got that from my mother. She's still a teacher. Anyway, so I turned into a master's degree in educational administration at Boston College, and then I took the first job basically that was offered to me at Pittsburgh State University, and it was a tech prep coordinator. Does anybody here remember tech prep? I didn't know anything about that, but I took the job, and I worked with 8 school districts in north central Massachusetts. So I had 8 different superintendents. That's a little intimidating for your first interview in a long time. And I got that job, and it was a great opportunity. And that's where I was really introduced to Monty Tech. About a year and a half into that job, the superintendent of Monty Tech said, stop working for tech prep and come work for me at Monty Tech. Just do what you're doing for tech prep, but for Monty Tech. So I was basically like a director of career services is what the position was called. It's like a career counselor. We didn't have a specific co-op coordinator, so I found myself working very closely with the vocational director, doing a lot of resume writing, a lot of interview etiquette, that kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed working with the kids, helping them find jobs and really talking to them about the different programs in the school. And that's when I really got to know, we had 20 programs at the time when I got there. I spent a lot of time walking around, going into the shop, seeing the kids in action, and they love to show off, right? Like, yes, look at what I'm doing right now. And I loved that job. But like I said, I've been at Whitaker for 16 years now, and I've had 4 superintendents. And between superintendent 1 and 2, my job description changed from director of career services to development coordinator. I didn't apply for that job, and it became kind of the catch-all job. I started writing competitive grants for the district. I started being the person that was in charge of program development. So I would often drive by an empty building and say, we could put a restaurant there, or we could move our cosmetology program. Like, I just am constantly thinking of ways to expand access, because even back then, 15 years ago, 16 years ago, Whitaker had a huge wait list. And we were really struggling with relationships with our sending districts. So myself and the superintendent would be the ones that would go meet with these superintendents from other school districts. And I found them to be very contentious, and I didn't understand why until I really delved into admissions and what that meant for those kids sitting on the wait list. So I was always trying to come up with creative ways to expand access. I found myself in charge of expanding the evening program. Thanks to a lot of funding from Commonwealth Corporation lately, we've had Career Technical Institute grants or Career Technical Initiative grants, which we've been able to do, and I know Minuteman's doing so well. We've renovated warehouses and created 3 new vocational spaces just for kids who have sat on wait lists for us. We built new veterinary science program and brought our 21st program to the school. That was a really fun, that was a passion project for me. It took me 5 years from start to finish to get that, not to get the program approved, but to get the program approved, the personnel hired, the curriculum developed, and a gorgeous new facility built and running on campus. So that was a 5-year project for me. I just love what I do. I'm happy at Whitaker. But it's time to not be the girl behind the curtain anymore. So I feel like I'm ready to contribute on a larger level at a school like Minuteman. It's just, well, you know, it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. Kids are great. So that's me. Any questions?
How would you describe your leadership style?
Okay, that's funny you should ask, because I was just talking about that earlier. So when you go through all these programs, you know, different professional development programs, there's all these different words for leadership. Are you distributive? Are you know, whatever. And so in my program at Boston College, one professor that I had used the word transactional versus transformational. And I am not transactional. I am not a quick fix person. I'm okay, yeah, we have to do this, but by doing this, where will it get us, right? So I'm constantly thinking of the institution as moving forward. So you can't be that person. I can't be the transformational leader that I'd like to think I am without transactional people and transformational people who have vision and ideas and are allowed to be creative. So I would call myself, I'm a transformational leader because I like to bring people in and discuss great ideas and celebrate accomplishments and then move an institution forward. I think if you walked into Whitaker right now and asked anybody, that's what they'd say I am. But that sounds a little hokey, right? To say I'm a transformational leader. What I am is somebody who really cares about people who I work with. I'm very protective of my school. I don't like it when people talk bad about vocational education. I don't like it when they talk bad about teachers. So I get very, very protective of my people. And I like it when people say, maybe you're uncomfortable with the concept of being in charge, but I've never been uncomfortable with the concept of taking care of those in my charge, making sure you have the resources you need to be the best you can be. And that to me is transformational leadership. No one person can run a school by themselves. So it takes everybody. It will take somebody like me to provide resources and constantly checking in and seeing if you're okay, if you feel supported, if you have what you need. That's me.
It's Sounds like you've had some really wonderful experiences and the opportunity to do a lot in the institution where you worked. If there was anything that was stood out as the high point, and you can explain that. And then anything that was a challenge, the bump in the road, and how did you learn from that experience?
Okay, so those are great questions. So High Point Veterinary Science, it was it's a project that I really was very, very excited about, and it's just doing so well that I'm just so proud when I see kids walking down the hall wearing their veterinary science stuff, right? So I was involved in every bit of that project, from deciding where on the campus we should pour the foundation to the color of the metal roof, right? So like every bit of that project was like my baby. I'm very, very proud of that. I'm also proud of some smaller scale things. Just the other day, I received word that we received a grant. Let me back up. We admitted a student this year who had Down syndrome, and people in the community, I love Monitech, just embraced the student and wanted to see her succeed. And I was visiting with a president of a collaborative who was talking to me about young adults that she works with, and they used the word stamina, that many of the adults she worked with didn't have the stamina for full-time jobs. And that I kept thinking about this student who was struggling at Monitech for the first few weeks she was there, because she didn't appear to have the stamina. And honestly, that week about schedule was just very challenging for her. She decided, and her mother decided, it would be best for her to go back to her sending district. It felt like like we had failed that student. We felt like we weren't enough, and Monitech is great, right? So how could we fail a student? And I remember somebody saying, well, this just isn't the place for her. So my back goes up, and I instantly thought, well, if we're not the place for her, then who is going to be the place for that kid? Because at some point, though she may not have the stamina now, at some point, she's going to need a vocation. She's going to need to feel like a contributing member. 24 hours later, I'm not even lying when I say 24 hours later, in my inbox, there was a grant that came out from ComCore. It was called Workforce Training Programs for Young Adults with Disabilities. And I sent it to my superintendent, and he goes, I know, go ahead, you can write it. So I sat in my office and I kind of crafted what I thought might be a nice little plan, very tight turnaround. I came up with this idea of what if we did like a total of 14, because it had to be spent by June. That's what's crazy about some of these grants. It was December when I found out. It was due at the end of December. It had to be spent by the end of June. So I thought, what if we could come up with a training program that would serve the adult population they wanted to serve was 18 to 35, and you had to be diagnosed disability, have a diagnosed disability. So I wrote it for those with Downs and autism, and 18 to 35, and we would offer 5 different training programs for a very short amount of time, 3 days a week, maybe 2 hours a day, maybe 10 weeks of that, maybe 1 week of interview etiquette, just relationship building kind of thing, and then 2-week internship, and then job placement. So that was the idea. And then I just started making phone calls to people that I know in the area, business owners. Everybody was so supportive. We got that grant the other day. I was so excited about it. And so because we got it so late, we had to condense it from 14 weeks to 12 weeks. But we're rolling out that program. That is not the scale of veterinary science. But I really believe that if we can do something like this one time and then do it again, it will just get better and better and become kind of the fabric of Monitech. Why can't we do something like that? It's literally going to serve 15 kids. It's not going to be huge, but I think to them and to their families, that will be, and that's something I'm very proud of. And then a failure. Now you want me to go with failure? That's fine. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. A bump in the road. That's good. A bump in the road 13 years ago. We had some administrative, some bad decisions were being made, and I was part of the administration. I was part of a 10-member administrative team. I was very new there, relatively new there. I'd been there 3 years-ish. I was a single mom. My kid was like 6. I was always feeling very worried about. It was not a healthy work environment. I'm going to say that. I never felt secure in my job. And then I started getting reports from other people in the building that they didn't feel secure in their job, and that they didn't know who to report it to, because the person that they should report it to was the person that was making them feel insecure. And so I'm listening to these stories and I'm thinking, I should do something. I don't know what to do. And so I kept listening to the stories. and I listened too long, right? So like, I should have done something sooner. I should have put aside my own worries about my own job security, my own, I don't know what to do. I should have been more resourceful quicker. I was part of the solution and the healing process, and I'd like to point out that while that was a terrible time and a really difficult time to work there, what has happened since then has been almost beautiful to watch. You put in the right leaders and really empathetic people who understand work-life balance and respectful boundaries and general professionalism. You put those people in place and you let them do their job, and administration just comes in as big, giant support system to everybody. It's amazing that those defenses that were there, the mistrust that was there, that didn't go away overnight, but it's going away. And so bump in the road, yes. Also watching it become part of the healing process. I've enjoyed being part of that healing. I do wish I had been better sooner on that one. I'll answer that one.
Minuteman has 9 member towns, and meeting with each and all the shareholders is a major component of the job.
Yes.
How familiar are you with reporting to town meetings, and can you explain your experiences?
Okay, so my job is not to report to town meetings. So historically, Monty Tech has always sent their business manager to town meetings. She's excellent. She's been there 26 years. So everybody knows Tammy, and that's what she does. I'm also a licensed business manager, and I've worked so closely with all of the superintendents that I've worked with that I understand those presentations. I've sat in on those presentations at our own school committees. I don't think it's anything I can't do at all. I just think it's something that I haven't done. I will say, being involved in high stakes meetings like that, where you have to really make sure you're articulating the value of vocational education and why their assessments went up, if their student enrollment only went up X number. It's going to be very important to know the budget in and out. It's going to be very important to know the demographic that you're talking to. I'm involved in meetings at all levels. I work with Department of Ed, I work with our local politicians, I work with chambers of commerce, workforce investment boards. So I do feel very well versed in all things vocational education. Would there be a learning curve to learn the Minuteman way? Yeah, yes. But do I think I'd be a competent and savvy representative of Minuteman interests? Yes, I think I can handle that.
What makes you the right fit for this position?
I don't know that I am, to be honest. I love vocational education. You know, I haven't applied for a job. This is so weird to me. Like, I didn't really see myself leaving Monty Tech, right? So somebody referred to it as an old shoe. It is better than an old shoe, Monty Tech, but I'm comfortable there, right? So, but when this opportunity presented itself, I considered very hard before I even applied, because I haven't applied for a job truly in vocational education in 18 years. And so I thought, well, you know, would I even, if I were to ever be offered this job, would I really take it? Why would I ever apply for a job I really wouldn't leave a place I'm comfortable and people I know and love? I would take it. This is a really beautiful community that's actually gone through a lot in the past few years, and I have experience with that. And I also have seen the good that comes out of, there's a weird little saying that says, nothing bonds people more than hating the same person, right? So, so you guys are all pretty well bonded, right? But it's true, right? So you're all very well bonded. And I remember that feeling 13, 14 years ago. It's difficult, but if you get back to a healing place, the good stuff about vocational education, it's a creative space. It's you encourage people to share ideas. Look at this building. I mean, there's a lot of things. Would I ever consider moving? Am I ready to be a superintendent? These are all things that kind of went through my head, and I think the building's 4 years old. It's half the number of communities I'm working with. It's half the number of students I'm used to working with. Sure, there's some bumps, but everybody's got their bumps, and I've been through something similar, so I'm not sure I'm the right fit. I'm sure I'm capable, and I'm a very competent leader. I know vocational education, but you have to be convinced. I can't you know, I don't know. That's a terrible job selling myself.
Piggybacking on what you just said, I totally agree with the hating comment.
I read that, so at some point.
I know this group would be shocked by that, but I feel as though we were, as a group, never more unified than we were during that terrible time.
I get it.
So how would you continue that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Because we really were a
I
unified
know.
group. For probably the first time, I've been here for 21 years,
Yeah.
in 21 years, and it was like, there was such a feeling of camaraderie.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Difficult situation, but like,
Yeah.
how do you keep that, or what would you say is your, like, momentum for keeping that?
Well, I don't want you guys to keep hating leadership, so I would change gears a little bit. I would change gears a little bit there. One of my friends, very good friend of mine, our vocational director, he came into my office yesterday, and he was peppering me with like fake questions, and he said, how do you cultivate a positive educational community? And I'm like, Ryan, this is how we do it. And so I say things like, well, every month or so at Bonnie Tech, we try to do something for the staff, right? And it sounds so goofy, but like, it's the little things that really do matter. Like next Wednesday, Valentine's Day, Kindness Week, we're bringing in pretzels and coffee for staff just to say thank you, right? And we have like an end of the year ice cream truck. These are goofy little answers, but it is ways to just build in, hey, we appreciate you. I see you. I thank you. But that's not enough. You have to get into the shops. You have to visit with academic teachers. You have to just be present. So yes, we can do things like, you know, welcome back gifts and, you know, a pretzel or, you know, some coffee breaks. Those are great. And I really believe, oddly enough, popcorn on a professional development day makes people so happy. But it's the things that are more impactful are just being present. And really, when I see you in a hall and I say, how are you doing? I want to know. Like, it won't just be, hey, how you doing? And just keep walking. I really want to know. That's, I think it's just gonna, if you can keep the camaraderie for the positive, right? So all the good things that Minuteman is doing and just keep celebrating those accomplishments, it'll stay. It'll stay. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what you think the intersection of academic and vocational learning is?
Well, I think Minuteman does it right on a lot of levels. So I don't know if it's the academy model that you guys are intentional about. But I'm in charge of professional development at Bonnie Tech, and so I'm constantly trying to visit with academic teachers and vocational teachers. Hey, like, what are you doing, and what are you doing, and how can we? But it's almost forced, right? Those are like, hey, do you think you could find a time to meet so you could, you know, develop some common language, some shared language, work on a common project? It's forced, but I think the model here is such that it's almost expected that academic teachers and vocational teachers should and could work together where appropriate. Had lunch today with 3 awesome student ambassadors, and one of them is building stage props, or I don't know, backdrops or scenery, and carpentry to support the production, right there, 12 Angry Men. And then the veterinary science kid there, she said, and culinary helped us when we were doing our nutrition lesson plan. And I thought, oh, we have culinary, we have veterinary science. We don't do like, you know, even cross shop things. So I think it's kind of built into the fabric of Minuteman that it's almost expected here. And I think it's great. I'm always open to encouraging more integration. And I'd like to hear what other people think, like there's some ideas, how have we missed the boat on that? How could we do it better? But right now you guys have a nice thing going. Another scene, I don't know. Anybody else? Oh, sorry.
So you mentioned earlier that you don't know if you're the right fit.
Yes, I did.
I assume in these months you've had many interviews, you've met with many people and really gotten to feel for a minute. What is, in the other you also said, but I would like the job.
Sure.
So what is it that you saw here in those weeks and with our people that made you really want to come here and decided that this was a good fit for you?
Okay, so it could be something as basic as, so we were working in Massachusetts Vocational Network. Every building's 60 years old, except for the ones that aren't, right? The handful of ones that aren't. So if I'm going to go in and be a new superintendent somewhere, am I going to go in and assume the responsibility of trying to get 18 member towns to vote in favor of an MSBA project and then have to rewrite the district agreement? And then that is a nightmare task for a new administrator working with a recently bruised faculty and staff. So that would be terrible, but you guys have a shiny new building. So it's not like there's that task that I have to tackle right away. The number of students, manageable. The number of communities, manageable. The commute from my home, manageable. And then I start researching Minuteman and World Bee Day. I can't stop talking about that project. It's remarkable. And I said it in my first interview, and I'll say it again. Whoever wrote that curriculum or designed that project needs to take it to ASCD or ACTE and present it on a national level as a really great way to collaborate vocational programs. Are you laughing?
No, I'm
But it's so remarkable, that project, it's remarkable.
I did, a whole group of us did.
But don't you think that's amazing? Like when I was reading about it, carpentry, it's just a remarkable example. And I was saying this in my first interview, and I'll say it again. You know, people talk, administrators talk about this year we're going to have a common summer read. No, you're not. It's not going to be common. Half the kids aren't going to read it, and nobody's sharing their reading experience, right? But if you do a common project during the school year, they're talking about it at lunch. They're talking about it in their academic classrooms. That is a shared experience. That's integrating academics and vocational lessons in a really beautiful and real world way. I love that project. So things like that, when I read things like that, I think I need to be part of that. When I was reading about your veterinary science project or program that didn't really have a home yet and doesn't have a partner and isn't affiliated with a clinic, I thought, oh, I could do that. Like I'm thinking, what could I contribute? So I don't know if I'm the right fit, but I do know I could contribute. I also know I'm not the kind of person that comes in that says, all right, I have 52 ideas and we're going to get them all done this year. Like, that's just not me. I'm going to spend the first year looking and learning and really, really learning what's important to this community, what are the priorities, and I'll act where I can in a reasonable manner, right, in first year. But, you know, yeah, I feel like I have ideas. I spent all day like looking at this campus and seeing all the, so many ideas. There's so many things, but yeah, I think I can contribute. That's why. Yeah. Yes.
How would people that work for you describe you?
I got an email this morning from the one I work closest with who said every time she leaves my office, she feels excited and empowered. And she said she thinks that after a day with me, she hopes people see that. And I thought, Melissa, like that meant so much to me.
Do you think that being superintendent it's a different job than where you are now? And it seems like you do little, like attaching a veterinary clinic to animal science seems like something that would be, I mean, I don't know, maybe it is something you do and pick up, but it seems like you would have bigger things to accomplish.
Yeah.
What else are we gonna, because it seems like that's something you really love doing.
I do love doing that, but those are the easy things to talk about. What's not fun to talk about in a setting like this is legislation that's out there that's talking about whether or not we should go to a lottery. That's what I do. That's a superintendent task. Superintendent task is vision, right? So it is somebody that has vision, that sees an empty building, that says, how can we maximize the space we've got here and improve the educational experience for our students? That is superintendent work. So while it may seem transactional in that I'm going to add a clinic here, the bigger picture is transforming what we've got here and making it the best it can be. But it's meetings with, lawyers and politicians and chambers of commerce that aren't great to talk about in these things, but those are very superintendent and very impactful too. So, and those are all things I have a ton of experience with. So, I know you don't know me, but trust me when I say I wouldn't apply for a job that I'm not equipped to do, and it would be a disservice to you if I did. You don't know me, but I promise I'm equipped to do the job. Yes. Oh, sorry.
Sure.
Okay.
So the position was posted this week for the principal's
Yes.
position. So the question is, what type of principal would you be looking for?
Well, it'd be very important for me to be involved in that search on some level. Not because I want to micromanage, but because I want to ensure that you don't have an experience like you just had. So I like a relatable, very present, somebody who clearly enjoys his work and students, somebody with a lot of experience, maybe classroom experience, maybe comes from a vocational setting in some sort of administrative capacity, whether that's a vocational director who just wants to move up a little bit or move over a little bit, however you'd like to see it. Somebody that understands the community that we're living in. So whether that's demographically or the kind of students that we work with, from an academic standpoint, what are the goals and how can that person articulate getting there? Like I said, I've worked for 4 superintendents and 2 of them were former principals. I worried when both of them came on that they may overstep into the role, like, because they went from principal to superintendent. And I thought, oh, please, because this could be a nightmare, because it's a shared building, right? The last thing you want to do is see a superintendent pretend to be a principal. You need a superintendent to be superintendent. I just want somebody very comfortable doing their own role, right?
It's something we know well.
I saw what I did there. I heard that. Yeah, I didn't mean to do that, but good job, Katy. Okay. Yeah. There's so many things, so many good qualities about a potential principal. I think somebody that can articulate that they know the job so that a new superintendent isn't having to delve into an area that she shouldn't be delving into. Superintendent's job is big enough. Right. Yes.
We have a higher than average number of students in special education. What is your experience supporting students with disabilities and also along with that supporting school mental health?
So we have an excellent guidance team and special ed team at Monty Tech, and I'm not an academic, right? So all I can say is that I bring in professional development that I think is worthwhile and meaningful, and I constantly talk to special ed teachers, academic teachers. What do you need? We see a different population come in every year. When you admit students, it's amazing the different needs that kind of come in with the students. I think we provide the resources that we can to teachers, paraprofessionals, support staff to make sure that they feel well equipped to do their job. All I know is that I have great respect for special education, special educators. I've obviously looked at the data, and so I've looked at the numbers, and I know that you're higher than the state average here. But I also know you guys do very well. And I also heard today and previously that you kind of front load your English and math freshman year, which is awesome. So it supports them as they're taking those high stakes tests and also just prepares them. So I think the scheduling that you guys are doing here is helpful. I think it's different than the model Monty Tech doesn't do that. This is a good model, so that's kind of interesting. I don't have direct experience leading special education departments. I'm not a special ed teacher. I did just contact New England Center for Children because of this grant that I was telling you about that I was so excited about. So they're going to come in March 8th, give us a professional development on working with students on the autism spectrum disorder. It's not a great answer. All I know is that I'm the resource person. You tell me what you need and I'll try to make sure that you have it. I also know, because I'm from a world of educators, that often the best teaching practices are those in special education. So you often think about like, well, why is this just a special ed technique? Why is this instructional style reserved for special ed, right? So when you think about lesson plans, and it's a bunch of words, and if you could just break that up with some pictures and some meaningful things that kids can access easier, I love that. And then I think, well, vocational education does that all the time. So the complement between special education and vocational education and those complementary instructional styles, I think are so awesome. And then couple that with your academy model, and so you're working so closely with the academic teachers. I'm sure some of that just bleeds right over into, these really top tier instructional styles. I think are probably shared across the school. I'd like to see it in those two.
What strategies do you have for communication between employees, staff members, and community as well as parents?
Okay, so I was asked this question in an interview, and I don't think I gave the answer that they wanted to hear, but it's the answer that I'm going to give, so I'll give it again. I think that the majority of communication between school and between instructional staff and administration probably should come from the principal, right? I don't want to be the superintendent that kind of jumps over. It's not a chain, it's the proper channels, right? Are there instances, many moments and instances, sure, where a superintendent's office should be communicating directly with faculty and staff, sure, right? But for the most part, the day-to-day communications should certainly, in my mind, come from the principal's office. School to home, are you talking about parents, like communications to parents?
Not just home and parents, but also other stakeholders.
Okay, so that's me. So that's a superintendent thing. So that's where you go out into the community. People talk about inward-facing communication and outward-facing communication. Superintendent's office, outward-facing. Principal's office, inward-facing, right? So chambers of commerce, workforce investment board, politicians, presidents of colleges, other superintendents, MAVA, like all these different organizations that are that could benefit your students or your practice. If I can build those relationships, communicating that way, that would be my job. The communication, day-to-day school functioning is a principal job in my mind. Yeah. And largely, I would agree. I would kind of extend that to say, school to home, parents to students. Most of that communication should and would come from a principal. And I gave this example in another interview. Monty Tech was a victim of a cyber attack this year. It was very awkward and terrible. But the superintendent's office obviously had to do a lot of that communication. It was a legal thing. It was a whole thing there. But so very involved in those types of communications. So I'm not saying it's off the table. That that's on you, principal. No, there's some things that are definitely district-oriented initiatives. Oh, good. Sorry. Hi.
What's your view on athletics?
Okay, so I love athletics. I had this guy at lunch today, Drew. He asked the same question. Do you know Drew? Yeah. He said, how would you improve athletics? And I think he won an award. He told us that. He's great. And I love athletics. I told him I was a soccer player in high school. And I think, at a comprehensive school, things like teams, so important, right? Because it's like a common something, right? And vocational schools, I love that they spend all week, Monday through Friday, every other week, and they have that shared experience. But it's good for them to spread their wings and, shake it off and get a shared experience, a different type of shared experience. So I love any team sport. I'm ridiculously competitive. I watch way too many Celtics games. I love it all. Your facilities are gorgeous. I've heard about potential plans with potential partners to expand, and I think that's a gorgeous idea. And bleachers are needed. Like, you guys need bleachers. You can't have a student section without bleachers. So I'd like to see that addressed relatively quickly, because that's an relatively easy fix. I would think some pieces of that should be You can't have a student section at a game if you don't have a place to put them. So there's that. I also say that because it's been on my mind for Monty Tech too. It's what we're going through right now. Schools everywhere need to put bleachers, safe bleachers. You guys need some bleachers, so we'll see. Teams, can I just kind of go back to that for a second? So recruiting for a vocational school, a regional vocational school is tough, right? So your kids from Lancaster, right? Are they really going to leave Lancaster? And they grew up in that town and everybody expects them to go to Neshoba. And then all of a sudden they decide they want to be a carpenter and they're going to leave all of their friends and they expected to be a chieftain. Who am I with this knowledge? Okay, they expected to be a chieftain and now all of a sudden they're not going to be a chieftain. That's a hard sell. So I think recruiting and highlighting real successes of the athletics program, you're not just coming to learn a trade, you can still participate and this team is great. Look how we've done X, Y, Z. My school historically has not been excellent in all the sports. We have a great basketball team now, and we've always been great in softball. So who knew? But, football is tough recruit for us. Yeah. Just saying. Yes.
How do you prioritize financial resources?
So I heard something once a long time ago, and I stick to it, and it's really something that it helps me all the time, right? Your budget should reflect your values, right? So, so there's always going to be a limited pot of money. And when I present to you my annual budget, you should be able to look at that and not see giant surprises because there should be these communications, little communications, bigger communications that come out and you kind of know this is where we as the community are going. So the budget should always, it shouldn't be a giant surprise. There may be a piece here or there, but for the most part, you should all understand this is why this money's here. We cut this here, we added this here, that's fine. But then you think about like marketing, right? So we invested a lot in marketing and it really turned the, we invested a lot in marketing and it's really been a wonderful thing for us. We opened a school store and so that initial investment was one thing, but now it's like this self-sustaining kind of piece. And for us, we don't have to change the message of the value of vocational education. But maybe for this demographic, it might be different, right? So maybe we do need to sell the value of vocational education. So are there marketing dollars in place? What does it look like? What kind of information are we putting in front of people? I'd have to know, it's almost like, yes, the budget reflects my values, but I almost have to learn the community's values and the community's values before I can determine what's going to be best for this school, for this district. It's not a great answer, but I can always back up what I put in a budget. There's always, I'd like to think, sound reasoning that goes on. I'm very, very thoughtful when it comes to putting together a budget. This is public money, and we ask for a lot of it. This district asks for a lot more than Monty Tech asked for, but it's also worth it. It's a beautiful, beautiful facility, wonderful opportunity for students, but we need to be able to back up what we're asking for. So. Anybody else?
Last call.
Okay.
Is there a question that you wish that we had asked that we did?
No, I wish I would have thought about that. No. Now I'm going to have to make something up.
Okay, then I'll ask.
Okay.
Throughout your career, you've had interactions with lots of superintendents and lots of people.
Yes.
Is there someone that you've identified as the person you want to emulate?
Yes.
Maybe not entirely.
100%. His name is Erwin Blummer. He was a professor of mine at Boston College. He's brilliant. He's a mentor now for superintendents still. He works with MASS. So if I were ever so lucky as to get this position, I would go through what's called the new superintendent induction program, and he's still a mentor. So I totally want him as my mentor. He's brilliant. I've never had anybody that I've had a conversation with that was, I listened to everything he said, and I soaked it all in. I was also like an older person going through the master's degree, and I think there's something to be said for that. I was taking it very, very seriously. I had a little kid at home, and this is what I wanted to do. So I was like hanging on every word he said, but he was so right in all the things. So 16, 18, 20 years later, I hear Erwin's voice all the time. And he was right about so many things. So yes, I'd like to emulate Dr. Erwin Blummer. Look him up. He's great.
Could you just share a couple of those things that you hear?
Yes, it's lonely at the top. And if you're not lonely, you're doing it wrong. And I thought, well, that seems a little sad. Again, right, I was way younger, and I had a cute little kid, and everything was happy. And I thought I was going into this job. Education is not lonely. You have colleagues and great stories, but I was going into administration, high-level administration. And he said, it's lonely at the top, and if you're not lonely, you're doing it wrong. And I remember thinking, what does he mean by that? Fast forward, I see administrators having lunch with certain people, only certain people, and only those people are listened to in decision-making. That's what he meant by that. I see budgets being developed that don't reflect the community's values, but maybe a small group of people that top-tier administration deems friends, or I'm going to listen to this group more than others. Perception is everything, right? So when he said that and I didn't understand it, I now understand it because I've seen it in action, and I've seen, though it may mean nothing that somebody's eating lunch behind closed doors with somebody all the time, it does mean something when your perspective isn't valued and theirs is, because now you're thinking, I don't like that. They have an end that I don't have, right? So all of a sudden it's like this, it's an unequal playing field, unlevel playing field, you know what I mean? Yeah, that's the one thing that keeps going off in my head. So I'll have no friends here if I get the job. Are there any other questions?
Really last call. Just curious, where do you live and you have a little boy?
I have a little girl. Well, it's not little anymore. I live in Lunenburg. My daughter's 22. She's not little anymore. She's graduating from BU in May, and she just got into USC, so she's moving to Los Angeles. I'm okay. In August. And she's just remarkable. She's going to get her doctorate in occupational therapy, and I just love her so much. And her name is Peyton. So if you ever want to get on my good side, ask me about Peyton. But we can't have lunch together. Just yeah. Are there any other questions? Yes.
It's not a question. I just want to thank you for your frankness and your honesty. It was very, very refreshing.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you. All right. Oh, can I just say one thing really quick? Sorry. I love this process that you guys have developed, that the school committee has developed. I saw online that you could fill out a form to give feedback. Even if I'm not your candidate, please give the feedback, because there's nothing worse than feeling like you weren't part. I know what you're going to say. There's nothing worse than feeling like you weren't part of the decision-making process. So please fill that form out. I don't know how that information will be used, but I'd like to imagine people are at least filling it out. Okay. All right. Thanks so much.